Prince Harry's defeat against Associated Newspapers has now become much bigger than a courtroom loss. It has turned into a crisis of credibility, a crisis of judgment, and potentially a constitutional problem for the monarchy itself. The Daily Mail's front page used one word to describe the outcome: vindicated. And whether Harry accepts that word or not, the public story has shifted dramatically. For years, Harry presented himself as a man fighting a righteous battle against the British press. He said he wanted accountability. He said he wanted truth. He framed his lawsuits as part of a larger mission connected to his mother, Princess Diana, to the treatment of Meghan, and to his belief that sections of the press had behaved unlawfully. But after this judgment, that mission looks badly damaged. The court did not give Harry the validation he wanted. Instead, the judgment raised serious questions about the way the case had been pursued, the strength of the evidence, and the seriousness of the allegations made against Associated Newspapers and its journalists. The source discussion referred to the judge finding that Harry gave limited evidence on the central issues and strayed beyond factual evidence while in the witness box. That does not mean every criticism of the press disappears. It does mean that the claims Harry and the other claimants brought did not stand up in the way they needed to. And that is why the reaction has been so fierce.
Breaking today, the Daily Mail has cried an overwhelming vindication after the dramatic £50 million courtroom win against the Daily Mail, as new questions are being asked about the state of Prince Harry's marriage to Meghan Markle as she stayed away from his darkest moment.
Harry can describe the outcome as a whitewash if he wants. He can suggest that the judgment was unfair. He can continue to say he intends to fight on. But when a prince of the realm publicly attacks the decision of a High Court judge, the issue no longer belongs only to tabloid newspapers. It becomes a question about Harry's relationship with the British legal system, the Crown, and his own father's position as head of state. That is the part that cannot be ignored. The judiciary dispenses justice in the name of the monarch. So when Harry suggests that the process has been tainted or whitewashed, critics ask an obvious question. How can he remain in formal royal positions while publicly undermining institutions connected to the Crown? How can he remain a councillor of state, legally entitled in certain circumstances to stand in for the monarch, if he is openly accusing the system of failing him whenever a judgment goes against him? This is why Richard Eden and others have raised the Councillor of State issue. It is not simply personal irritation with Harry. It is not just tabloid outrage. It is a constitutional contradiction. Harry lives in California. He no longer works for the royal family. He has repeatedly attacked the institution and its members. He has challenged the British government over security.
With onlookers saying he looked to be a broken man at Chatham House. Let me show you the front page of today's Daily Mail. A historic headline, one word, vindicated. But you can see the front page too of the Daily Star, which declares that Prince Harry is now hacked off. And that's for sure, isn't he? And Harry caned is the headline on the front page of this.
He has now criticised a court judgment in extremely serious terms. Yet, formal ties to the monarchy remain. At some point, the monarchy has to decide what those ties mean. The royal website is the easiest place to start. King Charles may not be able to remove Harry from the line of succession on his own because that is a constitutional and parliamentary matter. Removing titles would also involve political and legal complexity. But the royal website is different. It is the official presentation of the family and the institution. It tells the public who represents the Crown and how the palace understands each person's role. If Harry is still being presented in a way that implies closeness, relevance, or institutional belonging, critics will argue that the palace is failing to reflect reality. Harry and Meghan are not working royals. They left. They built a life abroad. They have used royal status commercially and publicly while criticizing the family and the institution they left behind. The website cannot continue forever, as if nothing has changed. That is why this judgment may become a line in the sand. The most immediate image from the day was Harry at Chatham House, trying to carry on while the court result landed around him. Those who were there said he did not look unbothered. He has never been famous for hiding his emotions, and according to the reporting discussed in the source, the result was etched across his face.
But the problem is, Harry can be as defiant in defeat as he wants. But his life's work is now in tatters. He tried his best, as the Daily Telegraph reported, to grin and bear it at Chatham House. However, as Hannah Furness, the royal editor who was there, reported, Harry is not known for his poker face. He is a heart-on-sleeve sort of person, for better and for worse, and the court case result was etched all over his face. And for very good reason.
His voice was said to have shaken. He looked isolated, and perhaps most strikingly, Meghan was not beside him. That absence has become its own story. No one outside the marriage knows exactly why Meghan stayed away from those moments. It would be irresponsible to state as fact what can only be inferred from outside. But public optics matter, and the optics were hard to miss. Harry was facing one of the most damaging public moments of his post-royal life, and his wife was not visible beside him. Commentators immediately began asking what that says about the state of the marriage. Some believe Meghan did not want to be associated with the defeat. Others suggest she may have known the case was risky and wanted distance from the humiliation. Some point to previous moments when Harry faced backlash alone and argue that Meghan is often absent when the pressure is on him, even though he has frequently stood beside her during her own public storms. Again, these are interpretations, not proven facts. But the fact that people now read the marriage this way tells us something important. The Sussexes built their public identity on visible unity, hand-holding, emotional support, the idea of the couple against the world. When one half of that couple is absent during a crisis, the public notices.
Gathered by the legal research team behind the claims was unconvincing and inconsistent, perhaps because so many of them were criminals. The evidence of a private detective whose alleged forged statement led to Harry, Elton John, Doreen Lawrence and Elizabeth Hurley joining the action was comprehensively undermined. So as Richard Eden of the Daily Mail posted, let's be clear here, Prince Harry is accusing a High Court judge who serves the Crown of a whitewash, i.e. a cover-up or corruption. How can King Charles allow Harry to remain a Councillor of State who is legally entitled to stand in for the monarch? Let me answer that, Richard.
The old choreography no longer works if the most important scene is missing one of the main characters. The Invictus question makes the absence even more delicate. Meghan may still appear at Invictus-related events. If she does, the story will immediately become whether she is there to support Harry, to shift attention away from the court defeat, or to reassert Sussex unity. If she stays away, critics will say she wanted distance from the loss. There is no easy option because the broader narrative around the Sussexes has become so distrustful. That is what happens when every public move is interpreted through strategy. The Daily Mail's victory also matters because of the journalists who were dragged into this case. People like Katie Nicholl described feeling vindicated. She explained that she had worked the old-fashioned way, knocking on doors, building contacts, speaking to sources, earning trust, and reporting through legitimate methods. The accusation that journalists had obtained stories unlawfully was not abstract for them. It affected real reputations and real careers. That is an important part of the story. Harry often speaks about the press as though it is a single hostile force. But behind the headlines are individual reporters. Some may behave badly, some may make mistakes, some may deserve criticism, but...
So she wasn't by his side for this really momentous occasion. And at 2 p.m. today, when we found out the results, he was doing a speech at Chatham House and his voice was shaking. He was all alone. He was clearly broken by the whole thing.
Yeah.
His wife wasn't by his side. But yeah, we may see her. We don't know for sure. We may see her in Birmingham for the Invictus Games event, which is to mark 1 year until the Invictus Games.
Yet he's saying now that he's going to fight on.
Royal editor of Vanity Fair and one of the hosts of Piers Morgan's new Royal show. But for a long time, the senior diary editor at the Mail on Sunday confirmed that Prince Harry had indeed invited her to party with him, something that has been now confirmed in court by Justice Nicklin, no matter what Harry says.
I partied with Prince Harry. That story came out in the court when, he couldn't remember, but he invited me into the party, into his inner circle. I did things the old-fashioned way, went and knocked on doors, curated.
Serious allegations of unlawful conduct are not minor. If those allegations are not proven, the journalists involved have every right to feel vindicated. The judgment appears to have reinforced one of the most basic truths of journalism. Not every unwanted story is illegally obtained. Sometimes a reporter has contacts, sometimes people talk, sometimes sources are close to the subject. Sometimes the information comes from social circles, friends, staff, acquaintances, or people with their own motives. Royal journalism has always worked this way. That does not mean every story is fair. It does not mean the press is always ethical. It does mean that Harry's assumption, or at least his public argument, that unwanted coverage must have come from unlawful behavior is too simplistic. This is where Diana's name enters the story again. Harry has repeatedly invoked his mother in his war against the press. His pain is real. Losing Diana at such a young age in such public circumstances would shape anyone's life. But commentators who knew Diana, including Piers Morgan and Paul Dacre, have pointed out that Diana had a complicated relationship with the press, including the Daily Mail. She spoke to journalists. She understood how to use media attention. She amended stories. She cultivated contacts. She was not...
Contacts, got people on side. I remember being told when I was under questioning, but, the Queen's late cousin, Lady Elizabeth Anson, at the time was a woman in her 70s. Why on earth would she speak to you? This sort of sense of disbelief that these sorts of people would speak to us. Well, they did. And in all of those years I spent at the Mail on Sunday, I never witnessed anything in terms of what we were accused of doing. And the accusations were despicable. So I feel emotional. I feel vindicated, Piers, is how I feel.
Well, you've been completely vindicated, as has the Mail.
Simply a passive victim of newspapers. That does not excuse the worst behavior of paparazzi or tabloids. It does not erase the intrusive and sometimes cruel media culture around her, but it complicates Harry's narrative. Diana was both pursued by the press and skilled at using it. That complexity matters because Harry's current campaign often depends on a simpler story. The press harmed Diana, the press threatens Meghan, and Harry must fight the same enemy to protect his family. But history is rarely that clean. Diana had relationships with journalists. Stories about the royal family have often come through lawful sources. And the court's findings in this case undermine the idea that the articles at issue were automatically the product of illegality. The security issue became tangled into the same day. After Harry left an event, his team reportedly asked for police assistance because of the crowd outside, but critics pointed out that the crowd appeared to consist largely of journalists. That distinction matters. Harry has argued for years that he faces serious security risks in the United Kingdom, and no one should dismiss genuine security concerns lightly. His profile, military service, and public statements may create real risks. But if every group of reporters becomes evidence in the security argument, the public will become skeptical. There is a difference between a dangerous mob.
Didn't we, about the whole hoo-ha about where is he going to stay, where's he not going to stay. And one of the reasons Buckingham Palace gave for not staying at the palace was, well, if you're going to make a statement after the case, what might you say, and therefore where does it affect the king in terms of his constitutional position? Harry said today this was a whitewash, and he also criticised the judge, Mr. Justice Nicklin, a High Court judge. And remember, it's the judiciary. They dispense justice in the name of who? The King.
You, sir, are an embarrassment.
And a press pack. There is a difference between public order management and personal royal protection. If Harry's team asks the Metropolitan Police to manage media presence, critics will inevitably ask whether ordinary police resources are being drawn into a public relations battle over Harry's security claims. This is why the Buckingham Palace accommodation row was so significant. One of the reasons reportedly given for Harry not staying at Buckingham Palace was the concern over what he might say after the judgment. That concern now looks justified. Imagine the optics if Harry had been inside a royal residence, perhaps even with royal portraits behind him, issuing a statement accusing the court process of being a whitewash. The king would have been dragged directly into a constitutional mess. That would have been intolerable. Some commentators even suspect that Harry wanted to stay at Buckingham Palace for precisely that symbolic value. That remains speculation, but it is not hard to see why the palace would be cautious. Harry has used high-profile settings before. He knows the power of imagery. A statement made from a royal residence would have carried far more weight than one issued from a hotel or private location. King Charles, in this case, appears to have drawn a boundary. The palace could not allow itself to become the backdrop for Harry's legal anger. It could not allow royal accommodation to be turned into a stage for a dispute with the judiciary.
I had to say, excuse me, there's so many press and members of the public here, this could become a public order offence, let's get the police in. So lots of issues with Prince Harry as ever, all coming together on one day today.
There's no one there. They're journalists. He even posted this on X, saying, oh, it seems Prince Harry's team have asked the Met Police to help police the crowds, but had to admit that it is mostly media. And you can actually see that. And of course, this entire case has exposed Prince Harry's argument, including how he shamefully and disgracefully continues to invoke the memory of his mother, even though Paul Dacre and now Piers Morgan have said, there's no way Diana would have wanted to pursue the Daily Mail. And remember, those two men actually knew Diana.
Diana used to call me regularly. I used to go around for lunch at Kensington Palace. She'd call me. I'd tape the calls and she knew I was taping her. I'd send her the copy.
Whatever emotional pull Charles may feel as a father, the institution had to protect itself. That is why some critics say Charles deserves credit for closing the door. But they also argue that he now has to go further. The calls to revisit Harry's status are growing louder. Some want him removed from the royal website. Some want his Councillor of State position addressed. Some go further and argue that he should be removed from the line of succession altogether. That last step would be legally and politically complicated, and it should not be treated as something the king can do with a private instruction. It would involve Parliament and potentially wider constitutional implications. But the fact that people are discussing it seriously is revealing. The argument is that Harry has placed himself outside the moral and practical boundaries of royal responsibility. He left royal duty, criticised the monarchy, monetised private family material, attacked the press, fought the state over security, and now publicly challenged the fairness of a legal judgment. Critics ask why someone in that position should remain formally close to the crown. The line of succession issue becomes even more sensitive because of Archie and Lilibet. Some commentators argue that the children are being raised in America with little direct knowledge of Britain or royal duty, and that their titles are more about cachet than service. That is a harsh argument, and the children should not be blamed for adult decisions. They did not choose where they were born.
The story I was going to run, she would send it back with little amendments. I've got all this, right? So this idea that Prince Harry seems to want the public to buy into, that every story about him and his family has been gained illegally by terrible journalists, it's just not true.
Well, it's been knocked out. Every single article was legitimately sourced, is Justice Nicklin's findings.
Of course it was. And Prince Harry,
where they live or how their parents use royal status. But their position does raise a real question for the future monarchy. What does royal title mean when detached from public duty and national connection? This question will only become more relevant under King William. William is widely expected to favour a smaller, more disciplined royal family. He has little incentive to preserve ambiguity around relatives who no longer serve the crown but still create institutional risk. The Sussexes may be tolerated in some form under Charles because Charles is Harry's father. Under William, the emotional calculation will be very different. That is why many people believe Harry's long-term royal position is far weaker than he understands. Then there is the money. The legal costs in this case are enormous. The source discussion referenced insurance coverage for claimants, personal policies, and overall estimated costs that may have risen toward £50 million. The exact final bills may depend on further hearings and determinations, including the hearing mentioned for July 29. But even if insurance covers some of the costs, there may still be a large gap. One estimate discussed suggested that each claimant could face several £1 million in exposure if remaining costs are divided. That may be easier for some claimants than others. Elton John has decades of music royalties and enormous wealth.
The Chelsea hospital today without Meghan Markle, and guess what? No crowds turned up, there's no pictures, there's no drama. I'm sure they'll be released once they're heavily edited, and probably they've filled in the top of his head because, good Lord, this guy is going bald, but that is a whole other issue. Alarmingly bald, you might say. But on a much more serious note, has the time come after this defeat to now remove Prince Harry from the line of succession? I believe absolutely, and I will reveal the results of a major outspoken poll on this in just one moment. But my friend
Elizabeth Hurley has her own resources. Harry, despite royal status, does not necessarily have endless liquid cash. His lifestyle is expensive. His security is expensive. His legal actions have been expensive. And his post-royal income streams are not what they once were. This raises another uncomfortable question. Who pays? Some speculated whether Elton John might help because he has been connected to Harry and the legal circle around the case. That is only speculation. Others wondered whether Harry might hope his father would somehow assist, directly or indirectly. But any bailout would create its own political and family problems. If Charles helped, critics would ask why the king is rescuing a son who has spent years attacking the institution. If Elton helped, the public would ask what arrangement existed between the claimants. If Harry pays himself, it may deepen financial strain in Montecito. There is no painless answer. Financial pressure also feeds back into the marriage conversation. Meghan's ventures have not yet proven they can sustain the Sussex lifestyle on their own. Harry's major commercial value has been tied to royal revelations, but that well is not infinite. If this court case leaves him with major liabilities, and if Meghan is trying to build a lifestyle brand while Harry keeps generating expensive legal drama, the tension becomes obvious.
Prove he remains a petulant boy who choked on his silver spoon. And she added, "You can bet the Sussexes will not be getting an invitation to the coronation of King William. My guess is the new monarch will act swiftly to create a smaller royal family, cutting Harry and his 2 children out of the line of succession altogether. And so say all of us. Archie and Lilibet are essentially Americans, with no knowledge of this nation. Frankly, it is insulting that they carry British titles, which are all about cachet untethered to duty. No wonder Harry is now making a last-ditch attempt to re-ingratiate himself with Papa, tempting him with access."
Again, no outsider knows the private marriage, but public pressure, money pressure, and reputational pressure are real forces. Any couple would feel them. A couple whose brand depends on unity, wealth, and emotional certainty will feel them even more. This is why Meghan's absence at Harry's darkest public moments keeps being discussed. It is not simply gossip. It is part of the larger question of whether the Sussex partnership is functioning as strongly as the public image once suggested. Harry has often appeared ready to defend Meghan at any cost. Critics now ask whether that support is returned when he is the one under pressure. That question may be unfair in some ways, but it is now part of the public conversation. The court defeat also affects Harry's relationship with the media going forward. Some reporters may feel less intimidated, some outlets may feel vindicated, some critics may become more direct. Harry has lost not only a case, but some of the fear factor around his legal threats. That may be one of the biggest consequences. If journalists believe that lawful reporting can survive aggressive legal action from Harry and other public figures, they may continue scrutinizing him more confidently. That is why some see this as a victory for press freedom. Not because the press is perfect. It is not.
A panel on this day of major breaking news, royal YouTube sensation, Steph the Alter Nerd, and according to Taz with me. Tash, look, I believe this is now so serious for King Charles that the line of succession has to be considered, that the royal website has to be considered, absolutely the Councillor of State situation has to be considered. I mean, let's just think about the seriousness of what Harry has done overnight, Tash. In some ways, it's been missed because of the overwhelming nature of the verdict. But Harry has gone public and effectively suggested that his own father's justice system is crooked.
Not because past tabloid wrongdoing should be forgotten. It should not. But because a free press cannot operate if every disliked story is treated as criminal by default. The public needs journalists who can report on powerful people. That includes royals. That includes Harry. And it includes Meghan. Harry and Meghan often describe criticism as hate, harm, or persecution. Sometimes criticism is unfair, sometimes it is cruel, sometimes it crosses lines. But not all criticism is hate. Not all scrutiny is abuse. When public figures use titles, commercial platforms, royal connections, and global media deals, journalists are allowed to ask questions. They are allowed to report contradictions. They are allowed to examine whether words and actions match. That is accountability. And accountability cannot only point outward. Harry wants the press held accountable. But he also has to be accountable for failed claims, inflammatory statements, expensive legal decisions, and the impact of his choices on the monarchy. Meghan wants control over her public image. But she also has to accept that public absence during a crisis, public branding during family turmoil, and continued use of royal status will invite scrutiny.
One thing that the king can absolutely do without the government, without having to get the ball rolling in that department, and let's be honest, Dan, our government's a complete shambles at the moment. They can't even get themselves together, let alone action in something as having Harry removed, having his dukedom removed, or removing him from the line of succession. But he can have him taken off the royal family website. This isn't the first time Harry has done this. We know that Harry is hot-headed. After he lost his final appeal to do with his security, we know he appeared on that BBC interview. There was no pushback, which was not really that shocking. Absolutely massive that he's done it. And I'm very surprised that Baroness Lawrence went along with it. But I did note it was only she and Harry that have agreed to do that joint statement together, because I think the others have gone, do you know what? That judge is going to decide exactly how much money we've got to pay out. It's time to maybe pipe down and keep our heads below the parapet here. Whereas Harry, well, I hope his bill gets doubled from this by the judge, and contempt of court. Publicly trashing a judge after that is just honestly mind-blowing.
Absolutely.
The Sussexes cannot be global public figures only when the headlines are flattering. This is the bargain they keep resisting. The bigger tragedy is that Harry still has causes worth protecting. Invictus matters, veterans matter, well child matters. The work connected to wounded service personnel and children deserves attention. But every time Harry's personal drama dominates the news, those causes risk being overshadowed. That is happening again. Instead of talking about the substance of Harry's engagements, people are talking about the court loss, Meghan's absence, legal costs, Buckingham Palace, police around journalists, and whether he should remain a Councillor of State. That is not good for Harry's charitable work. It is not good for the people those charities serve. If Harry truly wants to preserve the meaningful parts of his public life, he has to separate them from the war he keeps fighting. That means less litigation, less emotional escalation, less public pressure on the king, less reliance on Diana as the explanation for everything, less treating journalists as enemies while still depending on press coverage. And more humility. Humility is the missing word in this entire story. A humble response to defeat would have been disappointment, reflection, and restraint.
You agree, Steph, that actually now is the time? Because I give Charles a huge amount of credit for slamming the doors to Buckingham Palace shut and actually locking the gate this week. But it worries me that this was so close to happening, Steph, because just imagine the optics if he had decided to record a video responding to this court case or deliver an interview from within rooms of Buckingham Palace. I mean, I would argue, Steph, that could then have become a constitutional crisis.
Harry could have said he respected the court while disagreeing with parts of the judgment. He could have taken time before making further statements. He could have avoided language that suggested the system itself was corrupt. He could have protected his relationship with the Crown by recognizing the wider implications. Instead, he appeared defiant. Defiance can look strong when a person has been wronged, but when a court has rejected your case, defiance can look like denial. That is why this moment feels so dangerous for him. Harry's public identity has been built on being vindicated. He left the royal family and wanted the world to understand why. He spoke to Oprah and wanted validation. He made documentaries and wanted empathy. He wrote Spare and wanted his version of events accepted. He sued newspapers and wanted legal confirmation that his enemies had behaved unlawfully. But what happens when the validation does not arrive? What happens when the court says no? What happens when the palace does not provide the backdrop? What happens when Meghan is not at his side? What happens when the press he tried to defeat prints vindicated across its front page? That is the crisis Harry is facing now. It is not simply about money, though the money matters. It is not simply about marriage, though the optics matter. It is not simply about the press, though press freedom matters. It is about whether Harry can accept.
Well, opinion, conspiracy theory, whatever, I think that was Hazard's plan all along, because he only wanted to stay in Buckingham Palace for one night on Tuesday night, not the full duration of his trip. Why would that be? It would be because, as far as I'm concerned, he wanted to then set up another interview, let's say with the BBC, like he did last year when he lost his case for the security situation, but have it at Buckingham Palace and be like, oh, why, it didn't go in my favour because the...
For Harry, she's the most targeted woman, she's the most bullied woman, she's the biggest victim out of them. And Harry probably could have done with a bit of support from her, because let's be honest, he's not got many other people in his life willing to stick their neck out and to support him, because he's destroyed all of his relationships. But for Meghan to not be there, even in the background, that to me is not a good marriage. That is not a loving marriage. You know, even if my husband didn't want to go to an event, if he knew there was potential of me being upset at an event or something.
That his version of reality is not always the one institutions, courts, journalists, or the public will accept. If he cannot accept that, he will keep escalating. He may appeal, he may issue more statements, he may double down on the whitewash claim, he may blame advisors, the press, the palace, the government, or the system. But each escalation makes the road back harder. The king may still love him. That does not mean the crown can keep absorbing him. There is a difference between family love and institutional trust. Harry may still be Charles's son, but that does not mean he should remain presented as a royal asset. He may still be a prince by birth, but that does not mean he represents the monarchy's values. He may still have a private relationship with his father, but that relationship cannot be allowed to become a constitutional vulnerability. That is the line Charles now has to consider. The difficulty is that Charles has always had to balance two roles that now pull in opposite directions. As a father, he may want to leave doors open, he may want to avoid anything that looks punitive. He may feel that a public stripping away of Harry's remaining royal presentation would deepen the family fracture and give Harry another grievance to market. Those instincts are human and understandable. But as king, Charles has a different duty. The monarchy cannot be seen as endlessly tolerant of someone who uses royal status while attacking royal structures.
That actually the rows, what she describes as stand-up rows between Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are becoming ever more common. And she says the marriage is now toxic.
It cannot leave the public confused about whether Harry is inside or outside. It cannot allow a non-working royal abroad to keep appearing semi-official when his public actions repeatedly create institutional problems. And it cannot let family sentiment override the practical need for clarity. That is why the Councillor of State issue matters, even if Harry is unlikely to be called upon in practice. Symbols matter in monarchy, roles matter, titles matter, the public presentation of responsibility matters. If someone formally connected to the sovereign can publicly accuse the court system of a whitewash after losing a case, then the palace has to ask what signal is being sent by leaving everything unchanged. The answer may not be immediate removal from every formal position. The constitutional process is not simple, but doing nothing also sends a message. It says that Harry can keep escalating without consequence. It says royal proximity can survive almost any public attack. It says a prince can live as a private celebrity abroad, use the courts as a battlefield, criticize the state, and still be treated as though his official connection to the crown is merely a family detail. That is unsustainable. The palace has already learned this lesson with Andrew. The circumstances are very different, and the allegations around Andrew belong in a much more serious category. But the institutional principle is similar.
Pretty much right from the beginning. The relationship has been toxic right from the start. If you're to believe that Meghan Markle actually targeted Prince Harry through her Soho contacts, Marcus Anderson, this, that and the other, and that she never really married for love. She married for money, status, but then when she found out that Prince Harry wasn't the billionaire that she thought he was going to be, then whoopsie, we're going to have to leave the royal family.
When a member of the royal family becomes a reputational liability, the monarchy eventually has to create distance. It cannot let personal rank override institutional protection. Harry may not understand that because he still appears to interpret boundaries as rejection, but boundaries are how the monarchy survives. The same applies to the security narrative. Harry has every right to care about his safety and the safety of his family. But the public presentation of the issue has become tangled with drama, timing, and pressure. If a press pack outside an event is framed as evidence of danger, people will question the argument. If police are called to manage journalists, people will ask whether that is security or optics. If the Sussex team briefs possible travel, then complains about safety, the public will ask why the plans were public in the first place. This is not because people want Harry to be unsafe. It is because people can see when security is being folded into a wider narrative of grievance. The more Harry uses security as part of a public argument, the more the public tests the argument against what it can see. That is risky for him. If the visible threat looks like cameras and reporters rather than public danger, the claim loses force. If Meghan and the children are said to be possibly coming, then the audience asks whether Britain is truly too unsafe.
Life. What is she to do? Blame everyone but herself? Now, Harry's on the hook for a large portion to pay over £50 million in court cases, from this court case, apologies. Money which, if you're to believe the reports, Hazza and Megxie really don't have anymore.
No, although I do think a large proportion of it will be covered by insurance, but Charlotte Griffiths says all of that is being ironed out over the next few.
If they do not come, Harry can suggest they are being kept away. Either way, the issue becomes less about protection and more about leverage. That is a terrible place for a genuine security concern to end up. The press freedom issue is equally important. Harry is not wrong that parts of the press have behaved badly in the past. The history of phone hacking and unlawful information gathering is real. Some victims were treated appallingly. Some journalists and editors crossed lines that should never have been crossed. None of that disappears because Harry lost this case, but accountability has to be rooted in evidence. The danger in Harry's approach is that it can turn suspicion into accusation and accusation into a campaign. If a public figure can say, "I do not know how they got that story, therefore they must have obtained it unlawfully," journalism becomes impossible. Reporters would be forced to prove a negative every time a powerful person disliked coverage. That is not a free press. That is intimidation by litigation. This is why the Mail's victory matters beyond the Mail. Many people dislike the Daily Mail. Some disagree with its politics. Some dislike its tone. Some have legitimate complaints about past coverage. But the principle at stake is larger than one newspaper.
Royal News Network's been doing a bit of work on this, with Brittany posting, "Here's what we know about Prince Harry's potential legal bill after his spectacular loss against Daily Mail and Mail on Sunday associated newspapers. It's less than you might think. The claimants, which include Harry, were collectively insured for £14.1 million for the Daily Mail's cost. The claimants also had personal insurance policies of £2.35 million. That's a collective £30.55 million. But if you lose a court case like this, then you are generally required to not only pay your costs, but the defendant's costs as well. So here are the...
If a major publisher can be dragged through years of accusations without the evidence standing up, then the public has to ask whether legal action is being used to correct wrongdoing or to punish scrutiny. That question should concern everyone, including people who have no affection for tabloids. A democracy needs journalists who can investigate rich and powerful people. Royals are not exempt. Celebrities are not exempt. Politicians are not exempt. And if the press makes mistakes, there are legal remedies. But if the legal process becomes a tool to chill reporting, then the public loses. That is why journalists like Katie Nicholl sounded emotional after the judgment. The allegations were not theoretical to them. Their names, methods, sources, and reputations were put under suspicion. They had to explain that journalism often works through trust, social contacts, and old-fashioned reporting. They had to defend the legitimacy of their careers. For Harry, that may be difficult to accept because he sees the press through the lens of personal pain. But personal pain does not automatically prove unlawful conduct. That may be the hardest lesson of this entire case. There is also a longer-term financial and strategic problem for the Sussexes. If Harry continues appealing or fighting, he risks creating a deeper hole. Legal campaigns take time, money, emotional energy, and public goodwill.
Overall costs of the case in December 2025. We know these details as the court was incredibly concerned with the astronomical costs of the case and wanted to make sure both sides knew the financial impact of proceeding and potentially losing the case. Claimants cost £18.7 million. A&L costs £19.9 million. Overall costs £38.6 million. However, after the case was argued over several weeks, the costs are now estimated at an overall £50 million. At this point, there could be an outstanding £22.6 million that's not covered. The agreement done, because you'll remember, Tash, the original introduction to the slippery lawyer, David Sherborne, was done at the French estate of Elton John. Do you think, Tash, that might be something that happens? Because at this stage, even £3 million for Prince Harry is devastating, remembering that's about his security bill per year, which we know he is desperately trying to avoid having to pay, hence the total craven desire to get the British security.
Well, Harry's very entitled anyway, but he and Meghan have made a very...
Even when insurance covers part of the exposure, the process is expensive. And if the next stage fails, the sense of obsession grows. Meghan's brand cannot easily flourish beside that. It is difficult to sell domestic warmth, lifestyle ease, and aspirational calm, while the family story is dominated by lawsuits, court defeats, security complaints, palace disputes, and speculation over who will pay the bills. A jar of jam or a lifestyle email looks oddly small when placed next to a multi-million-pound legal loss. The Sussex image becomes split between two incompatible stories. Soft California reinvention on one side, scorched earth litigation on the other. That split may explain why Meghan's absence felt so loud. If she appears, she becomes part of Harry's defeat. If she stays away, she looks unsupportive. If her brand continues, it looks tone-deaf. If she pauses everything, it looks like crisis. Again, there is no clean move, because the strategy has boxed them in. The same is true of Harry's potential next steps. If he appeals, critics will say he cannot accept reality. If he stops, he has to absorb a crushing defeat. If he asks friends for help with legal costs, it reinforces the image of dependence. If he pays personally,
John will still earn hundreds of thousands of royalties, millions of pounds, because he is a hugely talented, iconic singer. It doesn't matter that he's practically retired now. That will live on forever, you know. And Elizabeth Hurley, whilst I'm not a big fan of her acting skills, she has obviously got a fair amount of money behind her as well, which means she's got a turnover coming in. Harry doesn't. He and Meghan do not have any discernible talents or skills whereby they are earning a regular income. All they know how to do is to spend. And
financial pressure grows. If Charles helps, the palace risks public anger. Every option carries damage. That is why the moment feels like a trap of Harry's own making. And it is the line William will almost certainly enforce more firmly in the future. For now, Harry's week has produced one brutal image. The Daily Mail celebrating vindication, journalists saying their reputations have been cleared, Meghan absent from his side, legal costs looming, palace doors closed, and Harry left insisting that the system has failed him again. The problem is that fewer people seem willing to believe him. And once public belief begins to fade, even a prince can look very alone.
Meghan's jam business, a matter of months away from officially being announced as going under or bankrupt or something. Harry's going to be very desperate to ask friends. He's got no family left that are willing to speak to him. But yeah, would he have the cheek to ask Elton to help him? Yes, absolutely. Will Elton help him? Probably not. The fact that he didn't sign up to do this joint statement tells me that perhaps Elton has decided that he's bowing out of this.
What a mess.